I have been playing horror games all my life. The horror genre is one that lends itself well to great engagement with its player base, and no series is more exemplary of that than the Silent Hill series. I have been wanting to talk about these games since I started this channel. I have been attached to the series from a very young age. Off the top of my head, I can see young 10, 12-year-old Emmett watching old playthroughs by Boffy Rocks and Ron Mithril. My later years were taken up by retrospectives from Jordan Underneath and Solidus Scully, all of whom are just as infatuated with the series as I am. When I finally got to play the games roughly around 2011-2012, I was enthralled, and to this day, I own copies of all 4 original games, including Shattered Memories. These 4 games are masterpieces through and through. Silent Hill 1 is classic survival horror. Silent Hill 2 might just be my favourite game ever made. And Silent Hill 3 was such a dark and beautifully executed game. Although I could discuss any number of these games in the series, there is just one on my mind right now. One that unequivocally altered my perception of the horror genre and left a lasting impact on me. That game was Silent Hill 4: The Room. A cruel, tragic and macabre descent into the corrupted mind of a serial killer, abandoned by those he loved and trusted, and thrust into a world that wouldn't hold his hand or hold him in its embrace. This is by and large the most haunting game I've ever played, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Silent Hill 4, unfortunately, was the byproduct of a withered and overworked development team. Konami were riding high on the coattails of the Silent Hill series, and not long after Silent Hill 3's release, they wanted more. Silent Hill 4 was actually being worked on simultaneously alongside Silent Hill 2, if my sources are to be believed. Yeah, really, this game is that old, and I used to subscribe myself to the theory that Silent Hill 4 was intended as a separate project with no attachment to the Silent Hill series. But make no mistake, Silent Hill 4: The Room was always intended to be a Silent Hill game, just a side project of sorts. It wasn't intended as a main entry. That said, Konami did what they do best and rushed the development team to get a new game out not long after Silent Hill 3's release. This is where Silent Hill 4 isolated many among the fanbase. It is a Silent Hill game, unmistakably, but it does so much different with the series formula and is so clearly unfinished that I understand why fans didn't and possibly still don't like it. Some major changes were made to the series formula, and many key elements of previous games were missing. One great example being the absence of a pocket radio, an item so integral to the series' identity as a way to figure out if an area was safe or not. It's a very different game, but to be honest, that's why I like it so much. Silent Hill 4 is such a unique departure from series tradition, and tries so many new things that it not only stands out from other games that came before it, it stands out among many other horror games. Silent Hill 4: The Room is a game that deserves your attention. Right now, you can pick up a PC copy on Good Old Games for about a tenner, which isn't especially egregious. In fact, for the game you're getting, that's downright generous. The Silent Hill series has recently had a major comeback with the Silent Hill 2 remake, and that's left fans thinking, what's next? If they have another remake planned, will it be Silent Hill 1 or Silent Hill 3? If I had any input in that conversation, I'd say I don't want to see either remade. I never even wanted to see a Silent Hill 2 remake, in all honesty. I was happy the way those games were. Now that said, the Silent Hill 2 remake has garnered some well-deserved praise, so I send my congratulations to Bloober Team. Anyway, although I'm getting a bit fatigued with all the remakes, if it were on the table, I would love to see Silent Hill 4 remade. I want that game to finally be given the love it deserves and to be the fully realised game it wanted to be. I know we're never going to get that though. Team Silent as a unit have split, and while we do have series darlings like Masahiro Ito and Akira Yamaoka returning to Silent Hill, it just won't be the same. Silent Hill 4 is the game that it is, and although it's sad to see that it was rushed, what we got was, without a shadow of a doubt, a horror magnum opus. Better than the 3 games that preceded it in some respects. That said, I've rambled long enough. It's time we immerse ourselves in all Silent Hill 4 has to offer. In that claustrophobic and spooky little apartment room that Henry Townsend has moved into. In 2002, Henry Townsend moves into apartment 302 of the South Ashfield Heights. For 2 years, he functioned like any other member of society. Reclusive, yes, but not a complete shut-in. Henry didn't really get to know many people around his apartment, preferring to just bide his time looking out the window and enjoying his solitude. But soon enough, he didn't have to worry about the outside world. Henry, 5 days prior to the events of the game, began having strange and demented dreams. Filth and rot all over his apartment, a heavy, sickly air around the place, and what looks like a face embedded in the wall. After the nightmares initially began, Henry Townsend awoke to a terrifying sight. He's trapped. Someone or something has seen fit to chain the inside of his apartment, stopping Henry from leaving. Not only this, he can't even contact the outside world. The TV and radio have stopped working, as though some elusive, invisible force is keeping him there permanently. Among the mess of chains and scratches all over Henry's door, a message is scrawled. "Don't go out, Walter." Henry is already suffering from cabin fever and doubts he can stand the isolation much more. It's such an ingenious premise. A typically reclusive, shy man is suddenly forced to endure permanent isolation in his tiny little apartment. This should be a dream come true, but instead he's feeling smothered, slowly losing his sanity the more he's left to this tiny space, and his own thoughts for company. However, as soon as he voices his concerns over what to do next, a solution presents itself. A hole in his bathroom wall.
What the hell? Somebody in there? I wonder if I can get out this way.
Confused as to how it could have even appeared there to begin with, Henry staves his concerns and pushes through the fear of where it may lead, instead choosing to crawl towards the light, in the hopes it might hold some answers. What an introduction. It ticks all the right boxes for what I look for in the opening moments of a horror game. What's happening to Henry's apartment, and where does the hole in the bathroom lead to? Henry's twisted nightmares and that menacing image of the chained door. The eerie quiet around room 302, broken only by Henry's footsteps, and just how off everything feels. Artificial almost. Living in an apartment myself, it's easy to connect with this setting and put myself in Henry's shoes. That smothering sense of claustrophobia walking around Henry's apartment never ceases to make me shiver. It's made even worse when you try and contact the outside world. You can slam on the window to no avail, you can cry out to those outside your door, and the most unnerving of all, you can try and call someone with a phone that's had its cord cut. I also have to mention the setting of South Ashfield itself. It's no Silent Hill, but it still manages to be an oppressive location. The grey colour scheme, cramped apartment rooms and claustrophobic design of the city, it all lends itself well to the overall atmosphere of Silent Hill 4. A real anxious feeling is left with the player. It's a smashing introduction, and it may be my favourite in the Silent Hill series. I could sit here analysing why I love this intro so much, but I'm pretty sure Henry's still sitting in that tunnel waiting for me to get a move on.
What the hell?
Once Henry exits the tunnel, you're suddenly thrust into what looks like a metro station. No signs of life besides you and a woman at the far end of the hall. Her name is Cynthia, and unlike Henry, she seems a lot more sociable. Maybe a little too sociable.
Anyway, I want to get out of here, but I can't find the exit. Say, will you help me find it? I'm kinda scared all alone. I'll do a special favor for you later. It's just a dream, so I might as well have some fun.
Aiming to get her out of the metro safe and claim this special favour, Henry and Cynthia press on looking for an escape. Although I could focus more directly on these two together, I'd rather talk about the metro itself. To keep it brief, Cynthia rushes to the toilet to vomit not long after meeting Henry. Waiting outside for her to return, a pack of deformed and decrepit dogs burst from the opposite toilet, acting as the game's first major enemy. Cynthia herself has seemingly vanished, only with a blood-caked mannequin left behind. There's also a hole in the bathroom. 3 guesses where that leads to. With the mysterious disappearance of Cynthia, Henry begins to traverse the abandoned metro, and I cannot gush about Silent Hill 4's environments enough. It's such an oppressive and surprisingly liminal game at times. All these wide open, dark, empty spaces, only broken up by the slurping, wailing and growls of enemies. It makes for a very tense horror experience. Not to mention some real sickly horror throughout. Giant throbbing tubes strewn throughout the station. Putrid hallways of rust, grates and flesh. It's classic Silent Hill environmental horror. Henry traverses the station some more in search of Cynthia, and luckily finds her inside one of the train cars. Problem is, their reunion is short-lived as Cynthia disappears yet again. Next we hear from her, she's on the Metro's intercom, having found the exit. And evidently, he's found her too.
Henry, I found the exit. Come to the turnstile. Henry, I found the exit. Come to the turnstile. Hurry! Hurry! It's him! He's coming!
As Henry rushes to help Cynthia and find the exit, he's stopped in his tracks by hands down one of the most frightening enemies in the game. This is a victim ghost, and they are by and large one of the best enemies in the entire Silent Hill series, and I am 100% stepping on some toes by saying that. The victim ghosts are, in essence, the reanimated spirits of people murdered in a ritualistic fashion. What's especially unique is that certain ghosts will inherit the characteristics of how they died, or have evidence displaying how it happened. A good example being this ghost here, Toby Archbold, with an enormous hole in the back of his head, possibly from the massive trauma he sustained having been pushed off a cliff. These ghosts are relentless. They'll basically chase Henry through the duration of the level you're on, and are extremely dangerous not only due to the damage they can cause when touching you, but just being around them gives Henry the headache of death that slowly drains his health. What you saw in the introduction is a great display of what these spirits are capable of, pulling and wrenching their way through a wall to get at Henry. It's a disgusting visual, and those sounds they make. Absolute nightmare fuel. Clearly restless as a result of their sudden and ritualistic deaths, Henry needs to avoid them like the plague. It does beg the question though, if they were killed as part of a ritual, who's doing the killing? Probably the same person who did this.
Are you okay?
It's just a dream, right? I think I drank too much last night. I never got to do that special favor for you. I feel like I'm dying.
Okay. It's just a dream.
Cynthia dies in Henry's arms, and despite his attempt to rationalise it as a dream when waking in his bed, an unnerving sight greets him out the window. Police surrounding the metro station, and a body being wheeled into an ambulance. Dream or not, if you die in that realm, you're dead in the real world too. From here, Henry essentially goes world hopping, traversing the hole in his apartment in search of answers. He simply wants to escape his apartment, but he gradually starts to become embroiled in a cultist plot that he, unknowingly, has been selected for. Just like that, I was hooked. Let it be known that Silent Hill 4 has the most engaging story of the original 4 games. Not the most complex, like Silent Hill 2, but it constantly kept my attention and had me guessing. However, it's not without its issues. Sadly, the biggest of these issues, and it's one thing Silent Hill fans unanimously agree on, Henry is such a boring protagonist.
Oh, man. What a dream.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
He is hands down the weakest main character in the series, and there's very little to keep the player invested in his outcome. This may very well be an intentional choice. As we discussed, Henry was a bit of a recluse before the game took place, so naturally, he's a bit socially stunted and finds it hard to connect with people socially. That said, I still think he has a personality akin to watching grass grow, and for a series that was beginning to have more complex protagonists that enhanced the storytelling, that is massively disappointing. This may very well be a byproduct of Silent Hill 4's rush development cycle, but I would think rule number 1 of crafting an interesting story would be to have an interesting main character.
Are you okay?
Nah, man. I'm pretty fucking far from okay.
Hurry up and get that ambulance. Quit yapping and move her already. Damn, she's got numbers carved into her chest. I wonder if...
Whilst we're here in Henry's apartment, allow me to touch on the gameplay briefly before we get back on track. The Silent Hill formula, as I've said, was heavily shook up for Silent Hill 4 in a few major ways, the most outstanding of these being the first-person perspective in Henry's apartment, alongside combat and inventory. Unlike previous entries, Henry doesn't have unlimited inventory space, with only 10 item slots made available to him. Many Silent Hill 4 detractors would count this as a point against Silent Hill 4, but to be honest, it didn't really bother me all that much, and it was important in a story sense, given that you have to return to Henry's apartment and store these items in your chest. All the while, you'll get interesting story events occurring outside the peephole, there may be notes scattered around his apartment, etc. In one of these instances, Henry notices something behind his dresser. He's greeted by a handgun on the floor and a new window to the outside world. It's another peephole into the apartment of his neighbour, Eileen Galvin. Eileen has shown clear concern at the fact that Henry hasn't left his apartment. Henry reciprocates this concern by keeping an eye on her.
There's something going on in this room.
What do you mean?
I heard weird noises coming from inside there.
Help!
Hey, Richard. Can you see anything from your window?
No. Everything looks pretty normal to me. The guy who lives here, what's he like anyway?
I know his name and face, but that's about it.
Well, I'm gonna go call the super.
Yeah, good idea.
Damn it. They can't hear me.
Though there is a certain voyeurism to this peephole into Eileen's bedroom, Henry isn't necessarily attracted to Eileen. He just wants to make sure she's safe, and with all the strange goings on around room 302, I can't really blame him. Once Henry enters the hole again, he lands in a forest just outside Silent Hill, at the heart of which is the Wish House Orphanage. Coincidentally, the orphanage is run by the cult of Silent Hill, whom we've encountered in previous entries. Along the way, he encounters more enemies of varying frustration and some new characters. Henry begins to explore the forest, where he bumps into...
So you came to investigate this stone too?
This fella, better known as Jasper Geen. Jasper doesn't really have much to add besides his stuttering ramblings, so we'll leave him chill here for the moment. Pressing on, we come across a young boy in the graveyard near the orphanage. Henry tries to get more answers and...
You're finally the third revelation. Something's gonna happen. That nosy guy that was here, he said it too. Something big is gonna happen. Finally, it's gonna happen!
Jesus Christ, I hope we don't see more of him. Searching for the orphanage nearby for answers. For fuck's sake. According to Jasper, he's thirsty. Why should we care? Well, because he has an item we need to progress. The trick is he wants something chocolatey to drink. But where am I supposed to find something like that? Aha. This is another really stellar example of why I enjoy Silent Hill 4. The puzzles are actually quite well done, really making you think outside the box. Not a moment later, after getting the trowel from Jasper in exchange for the chocolate milk, we have another great example of this. Digging up a rusted bloody key, we're warned that whoever possesses it will wander for eternity. Naturally, we can't walk back to the orphanage as the path repeats. What we can do is use the conveniently placed hole to travel back to the apartment, leave the item in the chest, and then travel back to the orphanage to grab the key from a hole nearby. It's really clever puzzle design. Using said key to enter the orphanage, the place has been ransacked. Notes on the ground discuss Alessa, a recurring character from Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3, and a report on this Walter character. As was said, this orphanage was under the influence of the cult of Silent Hill, and for any long-term Silent Hill fans, they're not exactly the most accommodating holy sect. Further inside by a collapsed altar, a sacrament reads as such, one which the children were likely conditioned to learn off by heart. The second sign. And God said, "Offer the blood of the 10 sinners and the white oil. Be then released from the bonds of flesh and gain the power of heaven. From the darkness and void, bring forth gloom and gird thyself with despair for the giver of wisdom." The third sign. And God said, "Return the source through sin's temptation. Under the watchful eye of the demon, wander alone in the formless chaos. Only then will the 4 atonements be in line."
I finally met him! The one the nosy guy talked about! The devil!
A special news report. In a forest near Silent Hill, the burned corpse of a 30-year-old male was discovered earlier today. The police have ruled it a homicide and are investigating. The numbers 17121 were reportedly carved into the man's body. Due to the marks on the victim, the police are investigating possible links to the Walter Sullivan case 10 years ago.
A pattern is developing. Henry visits a new world, meets a character, and just as quickly as they're introduced, they're murdered in a ritualistic fashion, with numbers carved into their skin. Not only that, let's not forget that on the door of each room the victim has perished, there was a placard. The mystery thickens, and it only grows larger with Henry's next excursion, this time to a prison in the middle of the ocean. Landing in this new area, we encounter possibly the next victim crying in his cell about a man named Walter, and how, in his words, he's gonna kill me.
He's gonna kill me. Walter's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me.
Exploring the various floors of the prison, we encounter what the fuck are these supposed? These are what's known as the twin victims, the physical manifestation of a pair of murdered twins. They're right up there with the victim ghosts as probably the most unsettling enemies in the game, and with good reason. Not only are they unpleasant to look at, they're also extremely nimble and will chase Henry once he's come too close. Yet again, they're a contender for one of the most unsettling enemies in the Silent Hill series, and the horror in Silent Hill 4 really benefits from it. Not just because of their design, but their presence from a lore perspective is really quite tragic. Now that being said, I'm jumping ahead of myself, so let's get back on track. Exploring the prison, you come to find out that children were taken from the orphanage and placed in here as punishment. All through the prison are notes from these kids. Some of them cry and want to go home. A few try and figure out a means of escape. There are those fearful of the people watching them, and others just can't take it anymore. It's really grim subject matter, but again, it makes Silent Hill 4 all the more haunting. The fact that children were put in these conditions and made to feel this defenseless. This section all comes to a head with Henry figuring out how the water prison works. He releases the water, turns some valves and lines it perfectly so as to free the prisoner we met earlier. This same prisoner is then seen begging forgiveness from the boy we met near the orphanage.
Please. Come on, let me out of here. I'm trying to die in here. Make me stay in there, Walter. I'm telling you, walk away.
Who is that boy? And who are you?
His name's Walter. Walter Sullivan. I used to work at the orphanage watching the kids. I'm Andrew DeSalvo. They tried to make it seem like an orphanage, but according to that town's holy scriptures, it was actually the center of their religion. And that kid Walter, he was really into that mumbo jumbo. Especially that descent of the Holy Mother business. It was scary. Oh, God. Oh my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
This young boy is the elusive Walter we've heard so much about. Not only that, his full name is Walter Sullivan. Why is that significant? Because he made his debut as far back as Silent Hill 2. For those of you scratching your head, in Silent Hill 2, James dropped a rubbish bag down a chute to solve a puzzle. When the bag split open, a news article came tumbling out. In it were the grisly details of the death of Billy and Miriam Locane, a pair of murdered twins. Reading on, once incarcerated, a friend of Walter recounted his ramblings about the Red Devil and how he made Walter kill them. Sullivan would ultimately die in prison, driving a soup spoon into his neck and severing his carotid artery. That can't be right though. Walter would have had to have been older to carry out these murders. More than that, how can Walter be here when he's supposed to be dead? All these questions and more will remain a mystery, as Henry is too late to ask Andrew for the details. Henry is left with more questions than answers at this point, and his goal of escaping 302 has now spiraled into a murder mystery. Blindly climbing into the hole again, Henry finds himself in what's known as Apartment World, and if you pay close attention to the neon sign atop the building, this is actually Hotel South Ashfield, the very same one you can see from Henry's apartment. The problem is, the geometry here is just wrong. It again gives that liminal feeling, similar to Henry's apartment or those images you see of creepy urban settings with nighttime ambience. It's probably one of the more unsettling locations in Silent Hill 4 thus far, and it certainly isn't helped by the nasty sound design. Not only that, but there's just this deafening silence at times, and it's something Silent Hill 4 does really well to make you uneasy. Not a single solitary sound to break the tension. Except maybe Henry's footsteps. Fucking fuck you, you freak, you're such a fuck. Henry's doing his usual, scouting around this new area, when a familiar face greets him. It's Richard Braintree from apartment 207. According to him, he too climbed through a hole that led him to discover this world. Not only that, he also reveals that Henry isn't the only one that was trapped in 302.
Lived in 302 before you. A journalist. He disappeared one day. He got pretty crazy towards the end. Shut himself up in his room and wouldn't come out. Anyway, I'm getting the hell out of here. You should too, if you know what's good for you.
Wait. Watch out for that kid.
Pushing on, you can come across an especially valuable item, what's known as the Sword of Obedience. They're especially tailored towards ghosts. Once pinned with the sword, they remain in place until it's removed, especially helpful for when you're trying to explore the world some more. That being said, you need to choose your ghosts carefully. There are only about 4 or 5 in the game in total, so be sure you want to use it beforehand. You can retrieve it later, but doing so will free the ghost. As Henry traverses Building World, resting briefly in the lift, he passes by Richard again, and it looks like he's too late. Richard gives chase to Walter, leading Henry to this massive staircase. Richard's death is, by and large, the most gruesome in the game, and even after all these years, it still has me shook. It's such a violent way to go, and it isn't helped by Richard desperately trying to talk to Henry as his brain is liquefied by electrical currents. From what we can gather, little Walter is no kid. No shit. But more interestingly, he says that Walter is 11121. All the other victims have been numbered so far too. Cynthia was 16121. Jasper was 17121. Andrew was 18. And now Richard is 19. If we remember that article from Silent Hill 2, Walter had 11121 carved into his body. Does this mean that little Walter was one of the sacraments? But how could he be? I thought Walter was the killer. None of it makes sense, and these notes aren't exactly piecing the whole story together. Oh yeah, lol, I should probably mention all these things by now. So basically, in between all the world hopping that's been going on, we've been picking up notes in Henry's apartment. Notes written by a man named Joseph Schreiber. Richard mentions that the man last trapped in 302 was a journalist, and going off these notes, Joseph definitely seems the type. In one of these notes, Joseph floats the idea of 01121 on the body of Jimmy Stone, Walter's first victim, being 01-21. This means that Jimmy Stone was the first in a series of killings. But why is 21 significant? Let's not forget the scripture we found in the orphanage. That wasn't just coincidence. These are what's known as the 21 sacraments. It's yet another ritual the cult of Silent Hill is aiming to perform to bring about their god, and clearly they've coaxed this Walter fella into doing their dirty work. But there is still so much that isn't adding up. Why is Walter killing these people? And more importantly, how can he be killing them? He's just a boy. Joseph mysteriously disappeared as evidenced by other characters and his notes. Was he killed? Was he one of the sacraments too? There's only one way to find out. The hole is bigger now. Not only that, all those whispers and crying coming from it. It stopped.
Looks like my apartment. But what the hell is this?
You heard correct. This is in fact Henry's apartment, but clearly a twisted, otherworldly version of it, not too dissimilar from previous Silent Hill games. What's especially cool from a story perspective with Apartment World is that you collect pieces of red paper, the very same paper Joseph writes on. Problem is, how do we read it? By slipping them under the door of room 302, which can then be collected when you go back in the hole. The hole. Which can then be collected when you go back in the hole. I'm sorry, but that is such a cool detail. It lends itself so well to the atmosphere. Do you know what? Okay, no, never mind. Let's move on. Moving further on, you can see the man that was pointing at Eileen's room and knocking on her door. According to him, he's familiar with Eileen and offers Henry a doll she gave him years ago.
I got this from Miss Galvin. A long, long time ago. She was younger than me back then.
She looked so happy, holding her mother's hand. Here. I'll give it to you.
I'm not touching it. Apartment World is yet another stellar piece of classic Silent Hill horror. The environments themselves are all wet and fleshy, but the actual interiors of every apartment are relatively intact and great at inducing a sense of dread and claustrophobia, especially considering the victim ghosts have access to these rooms and can trap you in the narrow hallways. And the sound design, Jesus Christ, the sound design. The wet, fleshy sound of Henry walking around the halls is already skin-crawlingly disgusting, but that ambience. All that said, it's not perfect. One aspect of this level that especially pisses me off is that stupid section involving the phone. Henry basically needs to ring a telephone to solve a puzzle. He does so, and the other phone starts ringing. And ringing, and ringing, and ringing, and ringing. Is somebody going to turn off that phone? No matter where you are, it keeps ringing, and it sounds the exact same no matter where you are. So there's no telling if you're closer or further away from it. Once you do find the phone, you land in an apartment room filled with paintings. Paintings of all the other tenants. This is another really cool piece of world building that fleshes out Silent Hill 4's setting. Just getting to see all these apartment rooms and how other tenants interacted with one another, it's interesting. You get to see their rivalries and so on. One of these is room 207, the very same room Richard was murdered in, and it's him. He's looking into Eileen's room again. By this point, there's no denying it. Eileen has to be one of the sacraments, and he's going to be the one to do it. Coming back to 302, we can peer into Eileen's room. She's safe, but he's still there and hasn't done anything. What could he be doing? Jesus Christ, I can't stomach this. I'm actually going to get sick with the suspense. Ignoring all that nightmarish imagery, we find a note that points us in the direction of Henry's bed. Pushing it to the side, we fish out a key to room 303. Eileen's room.
Did you find your mommy? This place? It's dangerous. You need to hurry. Get out of here.
We're too late. Eileen's dead, and Walter is one step closer to finishing the sacraments. There's still so many questions though. How could young Walter have been responsible for this? He doesn't look physically capable. Why was she thanking him? Wasn't Walter the one committing these grisly murders? And more importantly, who the fuck was that? Very little is making sense with this whole ordeal. But peeking into Eileen's room again, the officers investigating the scene have good news and bad news.
So they took the victim to St. Jerome's, huh?
Yeah, she's not gonna make it. She had numbers in her back, too. Walter Sullivan copycat. Round 3, huh?
Well, they never got the scumbag behind round 2 a few years back. Maybe it's the same guy.
What if 1, 2, and 3? What if they're all the same guy?
What the hell are you talking about? You know Sullivan killed himself. The weird thing is, there were no clues. Crime scenes were always spotless. No fingerprints, no fibers, nothing. Just the numbers. 20121. I've been a cop for a long time, but I never seen a case like this one. It's almost like they were killed by a ghost or something.
Eileen is being treated in St. Jerome's Hospital, so Walter obviously didn't kill Eileen, but there's little to go off in regards to Eileen's killer, with absolutely nothing left at the crime scene. What's even more unsettling is the hole we've been traversing this entire time is now suddenly blocked. How are we supposed to progress? Well, through the game, we've been collecting these ritualistic items like tablets and talismans. And now, a crack has appeared in Henry's apartment that looks eerily like a demon. When applying the succubus talisman to the wall, this appears with 4 indentations. By applying the 4 tablets we collected at the scene of each crime, that being temptation, source, watchfulness, and chaos, we discover a new doorway. After that disturbing piece of imagery, Henry can explore what looks to be a hospital. That hospital being St. Jerome's, the very same hospital Eileen was rushed to. In doing so, we get some of the trippiest horror and wild imagery that could ever have been conjured up by the original Team Silent. Padded cells with bodies sewn into them, more padded cells made to look like apartment blocks, sacks of meat with needles and medication all around. Eileen's head. Oh. But of all these trippy rooms, none unsettled me more than this one. It's calm and pleasant to look at, and that's exactly why it bothers me. Why is this here, and why is it so peaceful, after all we've seen so far? Moving on, you can see Eileen in... Eileen?
Eileen! Eileen, relax!
Henry? From next door. What are you doing here?
I don't
don't know where to start. There was this strange hole in my room. I saw people getting killed. All these weird other worlds. And I saw you get attacked too.
What are you talking about? I'm supposed to believe that?
But it's true. And there was a kid with you.
I remember now. I was getting ready to go to my friend's party. The boy protected me from the man with the coat. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I guess there's something wrong with me. I just feel so scared. This place. Where is it anyway?
I don't know either. But I do know that if you get killed here, then you die in the real world too. Anyway, the only way out of here is through that hole.
Okay. Okay, take me with you.
We did it. Eileen is safe, at least for now, but we get some major revelations dropped on us as we speak to her. By her own admission, Walter didn't hurt her. It was the man in the coat. Walter instead stopped the man from killing her, which may have saved her life. Henry mentions the hole leading to his room and that they could possibly use it to escape, keeping Eileen safe. She is a sacrament after all, and judging by the presence of the man in the coat, it's clearly not safe for her here. Problem is, Eileen is nowhere to be seen when landing in 302. But you've got bigger problems to attend to. The ceiling fan in Henry's apartment has collapsed, and with it, the safety of his own apartment room. How so? Well, for some reason, that fan has been keeping spirits at bay. Henry does feel the air get a bit heavier, and he can no longer heal automatically. But that's the least of his problems. Because now, Henry is about to experience hauntings. This, right here, might be the entire reason I wanted to do a video on Silent Hill 4. These hauntings are some of the most creative pieces of horror gameplay and imagery I've ever seen in my life. Before I get too excited though, some housekeeping. Through the game thus far, Henry has been collecting 2 items, saint medallions and holy candles. These items are essential to purifying Henry's apartment of hauntings. The candles would be preferred, but either item works fine. The radio is also essential to sniffing out hauntings. At times, you could end up not realising there's a haunting in 302 because it's in a separate room or very well hidden. In an ironic twist, the pocket radio of Silent Hill makes a comeback, the only difference being it's used to sniff out hauntings. If there's white noise, there's a haunting afoot. But if it's radio silent... radio... and silent, that's the name of the game. If it's silent, your apartment is clear and you can progress. Of course, you could ignore these hauntings if you're after one of the bad endings, but that's another story. With all that said and done, what are these hauntings? With the ceiling fan gone, Henry is prone to having paranormal activity type events occur around room 302. These could be as goofy as a pair of loafers tiptoeing into the kitchen with bloody footprints, or it could be coma-inducingly scary shit like this. What I'm about to cover are some of my favourites in the game. Credit goes to Mr. Edcar 007 for the footage of all the hauntings. He has a complete guide on his channel and it's what I'll be using for the hauntings I didn't have recorded. They are randomised after all. To kick us off, how's about something a bit tame? And a bit of a classic scenario in terms of horror. The television turns on by itself. Ooh. Intermittently, you'll see it flash images of Andrew DeSalvo's corpse, but that's about it. Place a holy candle on the ground and watch the television slowly shut off. Here's a pretty sneaky one. On inspection, it looks like the living room is fine. Nothing out of the ordinary until... it's actually the couch. Place down a holy candle and watch the couch show its true form. Next up, we have the heavy hitters. Easily a favourite among fans is this one here, the bloody peephole. Peering out to see who's at the door, you'll see none other than the possessed, rotting corpse of Henry Townsend. It's a pretty surreal piece of imagery and an unsettling thought. Staring down your own rotting body as it jitters around. Use a holy candle or a saint medallion and it'll slowly fade away. Next up, we have the example I gave earlier. The victim ghost clawing through Henry's wall. This is an old friend, of course. He's not only the first of the victim ghosts that's been chasing you, he's the same one that attacked you in the opening of the game. This, of course, is Jimmy Stone, victim 1 of 21. Also seen all over the box art and advertisements for Silent Hill 4. Following on from this is my absolute favourite haunting in the game. I have something a little embarrassing to admit. I do get a little bit of anxiety from unknown callers. I suppose it's not too outlandish a fear, but the idea that a random number could call me and I don't know what to expect from the call, it's always unsettled me. Maybe it's a spam caller, maybe it's a doctor giving me some bad news. Or maybe it's this.
I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you. I'm always watching you. I'm always...
This is why I had to dedicate a whole section to these hauntings. They are such an integral piece of Silent Hill 4's horror and completely strip any safety away from the player. Getting back on track, once Henry enters the hole again, Eileen goes off on a tangent. According to her, she couldn't see the hole Henry spoke of. He just disappeared without a trace. With no way to get Eileen safely out of this nightmare realm, he has no choice but to let her tag along. And she isn't the only one tagging along. the man in the coat begins to stalk our duo, likely intent on finishing what Walter Sullivan started and completing the 21 sacraments. Throughout the second half of the game, the man in the coat is a constant threat. He could be equipped with a pickaxe, a chainsaw, pistols, whatever he has to do to stop you disrupting the sacraments. Unfortunately, all this great world building and suspense is followed up by a very tedious walk through the previous areas of the game. Yes, the second half of the game is entirely backtracking the exact same areas with very little changed. This, of course, is a byproduct of Silent Hill 4's rush development. I'm sure more could have been done with the game, and it may very well have been better if Team Silent were just given more time. By travelling through each area, you come one step closer to the destination Joseph has sent you to. As one of his memos read, you've seen that world as well. That horrible nightmare. But if you get sucked into it, it's not just a nightmare. Don't get lost in there. If you get pulled in, you'll be killed. But there's still hope. Maybe the small key will guide you. If you've seen the door with the placard set in it, look on the other side of the door, then keep going down to the deepest part of him. And look for the ultimate truth. What is this ultimate truth? Well, I suppose we'll only know by slogging through all these areas we've already visited. That said, it's not all bad. There are some new scares, and we finally start getting answers to the questions that have been plaguing us since the beginning, which we'll delve into soon enough. First off, I have to draw attention to, without a doubt, the best variations of the victim ghost we've seen. Look at them. Don't they look familiar to you? These are the ghosts of the 4 victims you failed to save. Cynthia Velasquez, Jasper Geen, Andrew DeSalvo, and Richard Braintree. All of whom are now impeding Henry's progress. And what's so unique is each ghost have their own style and mechanics. Cynthia is, well, that ring girl. Jasper is the Human Torch. Andrew DeSalvo... What? Did he just Sonic Spinball me to death? What the fuck was that? And Richard is spazzing the fuck out, given that he was electrocuted to death. Jokes aside, they are very unsettling to look at. Especially Andrew, the way he floats towards you with that shit-eating little smirk on his face. But what's more unnerving is his singing. That isn't just some random hymn or tune. Andrew is singing the 21 sacraments. Creepy, isn't it? Anyway, getting back to the story. Henry must traverse the many worlds we've seen previously. With each new area, we descend deeper and deeper, getting darker and darker as we go. Along the way, we make some pretty crucial discoveries, and it's this section of the video in which I'd like to now finally compile what we know. There have been all kinds of notes, story bits, dialogue thrown our way to give us a complete story, just before reaching our final destination. I've talked at length about the hauntings, the gameplay, the enemies, but very little about what underscores the plot of Silent Hill 4, and there's a good reason for that. Silent Hill 4 has the best story of the whole series, and it's only now as it comes together that we can finally appreciate it. Walter Sullivan was born in 1967 in room 302 of the South Ashfield Heights, 37 years before the events of Silent Hill 4. Abandoned by his parents shortly after birth, he was discovered by the superintendent Frank Sunderland. Shortly after this already rough start at life, Walter's situation would only deteriorate as he was taken in by the Wish House orphanage. As we established, it was under the control of the cult of Silent Hill. Walter Sullivan, for the majority of his childhood, was fed a steady diet of cult dogma and was enamoured by their teachings. Especially that of the descent of the Holy Mother, the 21 sacraments. Walter was led to believe that these sacraments would bring about the return of his lost mother, and Dahlia Gillespie of Silent Hill 1 fame would push him in the right direction. Problem is, he misinterpreted what Dahlia had said to him and began believing that room 302 itself was his mother.
Do you know where she is now?
Yeah, of course. Right where I was born. Lots of people tried to stop me, but it's fine now. It says in the scriptures that I'll be with her. I gotta hurry. Mom's waiting.
During this time, Walter was subject to brutal abuse at the hands of his overseers, spending large chunks of time at the water prison where he was watched and abused by the facility's caretaker, Andrew DeSalvo. Finally breaking free of the cult sometime in the 1980s, he spent a good chunk of his adolescence homeless trying to get by, and it was during this time on the street he met someone very special, Eileen Galvin. Just 5 years old at the time, Eileen would gift Walter her doll, and this kindness, likely the only Walter had experienced his entire life, caused him to burst into tears. Filled with resolve, he began to turn his life around by moving to Pleasant River and even applying to a local college. For a few years, all was well in Walter's life, but it couldn't last forever. The cult had left an impact on him, and after years of torments at the hands of priests, cruel caretakers at the water prison where he was often punished, and anyone else that was cruel to him, he was brought back to that one burning thought. What if? What if I completed the 21 sacraments? The first sign. And God said, at the time of fullness, cleanse the world with my rage. Gather forth the white oil, the black cup, and the blood of the 10 sinners. Prepare for the ritual of Holy Assumption. Walter Sullivan now begins work on what has been dubbed the 10 Hearts murders. 10 victims were killed over a string of days in South Ashfield, all of whom had their hearts removed from their bodies with numbers carved in their skin. These include people such as Jimmy Stone, George Roston, and Billy, as well as his sister Miriam Locane, both of whom were children and hacked beyond recognition by an axe. These ruthless string of killings shocked Ashfield and had come to a sudden stop with the capture of Walter Sullivan himself in 2001. Walter would later die in prison, a soup spoon rammed into his neck, severing his carotid artery, with something significant left behind. 1121 carved in his foot. The second sign. And God said, offer the blood of the 10 sinners and the white oil. Be then released from the bonds of flesh and gain the power of heaven. From the darkness and void, bring forth gloom and gird thyself with despair for the giver of wisdom. With Walter Sullivan dead, all was peaceful in South Ashfield, and the community began to recover from these string of violent murders. That was until the body of a young man was discovered. Peter Walls, a local high school student with absolutely zero evidence left behind. All except one thing. The numbers 1221 carved into his body. It should be noted that the media and police had mistakenly thought these numbers were 11121 and 12121, not realising there was a slash between them. Thus, Walter's killings remained a mystery. The second round of murders were deemed a copycat, given they hadn't had their hearts removed. But of course, this was all part of the ritual and its stipulations. That begs the question though, Sullivan is dead, so how is he killing again? Let's remember the previous proverb. What's the name of the ritual? The ritual of holy assumption. Walter quite literally used the power of the 10 Hearts murders and that of the Silent Hill cult to resurrect himself. In doing so, the Walter Sullivan we know was dead and buried, and in his stead was Walter's spirit, having separated himself from his corporeal form. It gave him leeway to complete the sacraments without the flesh hindering him. As the proverb says, be then released from the bonds of flesh. With this, Walter lost any shred of humanity he may have, and became nothing more than a vengeful spirit, committed to completing the ritual and being reunited with his mother. During the second round of killings, a man began to investigate the Walter Sullivan case and the supposed Walter Sullivan Round 2 case that's erupted. His name is Joseph Schreiber, and it's this Joseph we have to thank for what we know of Walter Sullivan, compiling all his notes within apartment 302. The longer his investigation went on, the more he began to crack under the pressure. He visits Walter's grave by the Wish House orphanage, only to find it empty. He locks himself inside 302, becoming more paranoid of Walter and realising the power he wields. He has theories as to Walter's disappearance and how the police may have got the wrong guy, but nothing is adding up, and soon enough, it'll be too late. Joseph wakes up one morning to see his apartment in ruins. Mould and rot all over. It doesn't even look the same as his old apartment. But before he can even get his bearings, the ghost of Jimmy Stone emerges from the wall and attacks him. "15 of 21. The third sign. And God said, return the source through sin's temptation. Under the watchful eye of the demon, wander alone in the formless chaos. Only then will the 4 atonements be in alignment." You may have noticed some familiar words in that proverb. Temptation, source, watchfulness, and chaos. All of which pertain to the 4 characters we've seen die in the game thus far, putting Walter's killings at 19 out of 21. Eileen was of course 20 of 21, but Walter failed at killing her. Through the many revisitations of previous worlds, we finally get to interact with little Walter. Further on from this, we see the interaction between Walter and the man in the coat, and it's here that we get our big reveal.
I'm going to see my mom. Stay out of my way. Who are you, anyway?
My name's Walter. Walter Sullivan. It's time to complete the 21 sacraments.
But that's my name. And what are the 21 sacraments?
Don't worry. You'll know soon enough. Well, let's go and see Mother.
Let me go, that hurts.
Damn.
Little Walter and the man in the coat are one and the same. This is Walter Sullivan. In the process of separating his soul from his body, something went wrong and 2 versions of Walter were created. How did this come about? It's never really explained, likely because Silent Hill 4 is unfinished, which is a shame. But regardless, let's move on. He's been stalking Henry and Eileen the entire game. slowly but surely finishing the sacraments, and only through revisiting past areas and reminding ourselves of those we failed to save, do we finally arrive at it. The ultimate truth.
It's him.
You've done well to make it this far. Let me tell you something about him. Walter Sullivan. When he was a little boy, he began to believe that my apartment was actually his birth mother. He decided to free her from the stains and corruption of this world. At the orphanage, he learned of the 21 sacraments, the only way to purify her. And soon, he's planning to finish his work, the 21 sacraments. Number 20, the Mother Reborn, Eileen Galvin. Number 21, the Receiver of Wisdom, Henry Townsend. Hurry, she's taken over. She's number 20, the Mother Reborn. The Crimson Tome. Obey the Crimson Tome. Kill him. Must kill him. Kill. Kill. Kill.
And with that cutscene, we realise that Henry himself is a sacrament. The final of the 21 sacraments, and the man we just spoke to was none other than Joseph Schreiber, the giver of wisdom. Henry, of course, as stated, is the receiver. It all makes sense. The notes around Henry's room, Joseph was trying to lead Henry to the ultimate truth. That he was the receiver, that he was the one to stop Walter from completing the sacraments. Retrieving a pickaxe from the walls of 302 in the other world, we return to the real room 302 and knock down the same wall it was embedded in. What follows is truly stomach-churning. This is the corpse of Walter Sullivan, and it's been hidden in the walls of Henry's apartment the entire time. Hidden in his jacket is what we've been looking for since the start of the game. The keys to leave 302. something's wrong. This isn't South Ashfield. It's his version of South Ashfield. The other world is bleeding into reality, and Walter is feral by now. He knows you're here, and he's committed to completing the sacraments despite your interference. We get some world-class horror through the final section of the game, and it makes my stomach turn. The soundtrack during certain areas is both terrifying and tragic. What you're hearing now is the track dubbed Ill Fate, of course composed by the master of ambient horror, Akira Yamaoka. Come to think of it, I haven't really talked all that much about Silent Hill 4's soundtrack, despite the fact it's one of my favourites in the series. Akira really outdid himself with the ambient sounds combined with the more aggressive and haunting melodies. Songs like Wounded War Song and Room of Angel are some of the most recognisable in the Silent Hill series. The more horror-themed tracks like the victim ghost ambience and the moaning and groaning tracks are straight out of someone's nightmares. And this next track is just... Look, this whole final section of the game has the player's blood pumping. There are twin victims everywhere, the level design is disgusting and pulsating. But this next track is just pure tragedy. As you traverse the South Ashfield apartments, you'll begin to hear a familiar voice. It's little Walter, crying out to his father. All the while, this very haunting and forlorn music plays in the background, dubbed Resting Comfortably. This right here is another major reason I wanted to talk about the horror of Silent Hill 4. This game is just as much about pitying Walter as it is condemning him. Walter Sullivan is a killer, and a very violent one at that. But it's so hard to hold nothing but contempt for him. He was a frightened little boy, manipulated by those around him into committing these violent murders. And as we visit more of the apartment rooms, you'll see Walter's corpse bound and hanging from the ceiling. Interacting with these bodies, we hear sound bites of the kind of man Walter is crying out to.
Oh, shut the hell up! You can't blame it all on me. I told you we shouldn't have a baby, didn't I? Anyway, let's get out of here. I can't stand it anymore. If that super hears him, we're in trouble. There's something about that guy. I just don't like the look of him. Hurry up. Get back.
Poor little Walter. Crying out to a waste of a father that never wanted him in the first place. Silent Hill 4 is just as much a story about the importance of parental figures as it is about the horror of Silent Hill itself. I'm lucky to have grown up with two parents I hold very near to my heart, and that's what makes Walter's tale all the more upsetting. It's not fair what he went through, and as a result of it, he was manipulated into the monster he is today. Eileen herself echoes these sympathies in the next scene we find her in.
Eileen?
It's terrible. That poor little boy. His parents just threw him away right after he was born. Poor thing. He really thinks that room 302 is his mother. I've gotta help him.
From here, Henry visits the superintendent's room, where he finds Walter Sullivan's umbilical cord that the superintendent kept for some reason. Eileen goes on her way in an attempt to find Walter and help him, and Henry gives chase, naturally fearing Eileen will end up hurt, or worse. Returning to 302, it looks like Walter's body is gone, and in its stead, that huge puddle of black liquid that looks deep enough to jump into. Henry, curled up like a fetus, lands in a room filled with 10 effigies. The 10 hearts Walter took before his suicide. Pressing on, we then find ourselves at the final confrontation, with the remaining effigies in place, and Walter's twisted plan almost at its conclusion.
Hey there, little Walter. Just a little longer now. Henry, you're it. The last of the 21 sacraments. The final sign. The receiver of wisdom.
With victim 20 of 21, the mother reborn possessed and slowly heading towards her death, it's up to Henry to disrupt the ritual and kill Walter Sullivan. The music during this whole segment is a catharsis of all the horror Henry has seen thus far. All the while, Walter gives his maniacal laugh as he attacks Henry and uses his powers to disrupt him. It's a very nail-biting fight, frustrating at times given Walter's ability to knock Henry on his arse, but you feel the strain of it. The creature hanging from the ceiling is actually Walter's mother, or at least a manifestation of it, given Walter's twisted worldview. Inserting his umbilical cord into his mother's womb, it renders Walter vulnerable, and a collection of spears appear around the room. Once all of them have pierced the mother's flesh, Walter's ghostly powers fade away and he becomes human once again. Now it's time to finally put an end to the 21 sacraments. Round after round and smashing Walter's physical body with your pickaxe, it's a real test of endurance. Walter is an imposing antagonist and he won't go down without a fight. It's frustrating to a certain degree given that Eileen is constantly walking to her death, but it's still a suspenseful fight. And I can't begin to describe the relief that washed over me when I finally drove that pickaxe into Walter's body a final time, watching him tumble to the ground.
Thanks. Aww. Guess we'll have to find a new place to live, huh?
To put one final cap on Silent Hill 4 before discussing its impact, let's have a look at the endings, and following on from Silent Hill 3, it's great to see more than just 3 conclusions to the story. Silent Hill 4 has a few endings, all depending on various boxes ticked through the story. Most importantly, did you save Eileen during the final encounter, and how many hauntings did you leave fester in your apartment. You'll either receive one good ending or a whole lot of bad ones. The one we just saw was that of the escape ending, in which Walter Sullivan is defeated and the 21 sacraments are put to an end. With that, both Eileen and Henry can leave South Ashfield safe and sound. Following on from this, a similar ending is that of the mother ending, in which Eileen is saved, but she plans on returning to South Ashfield. It's also made clear that Henry's apartment is still haunted, with grime and rot all over it, suggesting that Walter's presence still haunts 302, and he may return again. The following endings are the very bad endings. The Eileen's death ending speaks for itself. Henry may have defeated Walter and purified 302, but in the process Eileen died and leaves a heartbroken Henry to collapse to the floor. The worst of all these endings is what's known as the 21 Sacraments ending. I'm sure you can see where this is going. This ending can be drastically hurried along by allowing Eileen to take damage in the main game. The damage she takes hurries along her possession, and she begins to inherit the mind of little Walter. That said, Eileen can be tricky to understand at times. Her condition and the damage she takes determines how fast she marches to her death during the final fight. The problem is, it can be a bit hard to gauge how she's doing at times. There have been myths online about clearing her possession with holy candles and the like, but it seems this has largely been debunked. Getting back to the ending, Henry defeats Walter, but with Eileen's death and the complete haunting of his apartment, he collapses to the floor in pain and Walter disappears. With this headache, his fate is sealed. Little Walter finally gets what he wants. He reunites with his stinking, rotten corpse of a mother that is room 302. A radio report is heard after. As we see, Walter is looking defeated in the corner. According to the report, both Eileen and Henry were murdered, and atop that, the superintendent Frank has been murdered too. Not only that, police officers have turned up dead, and many occupants of other apartments in South Ashfield have started suffering heart attacks. In this ending, while confusing to a certain degree, it's basically a show of Walter won, but at what cost? He stands in the corner, his head hung in shame. Abused and manipulated by the cult, he's birthed their god into existence to wreak havoc on the world, and he has nothing to show for it. No mother, just this rotten, decrepit apartment. All these endings are great, but it is another strike against Silent Hill 4, admittedly. The endings aren't exactly too fleshed out, likely given the rushed development cycle. As a result, what we get are some sound and downright tragic conclusions to the story at times. They just could have been explained further. With that, I think we've pretty much covered the plot and horror behind Silent Hill 4, so let's put a cap on everything. As I said at the very beginning of this video essay, Silent Hill 4 remains a divisive title. Most people these days at least enjoy the game, but there's a cohort that still dislike it. I can really only speak for myself when I say that I love Silent Hill 4. I think it's just as good as the previous entries and an amazing piece of horror in its own right. Surely I can't be the only one that thinks that, because Silent Hill 4 has left more of an impact than you might think. Many games today have paid homage to it in one way or another, and its use of the paranormal. Most notably, the cancelled Silent Hills game teased with the PT demo years ago. It's a great game, and whether you're discussing the enemy design, the gameplay, the story, Silent Hill 4 The Room deserves to be remembered. For many people, the golden age of Silent Hill was the first 3 games, but in my eyes, that will always be the first 4. It is a masterpiece, no doubt, but there are clear flaws. Some I made clear, and others I didn't really tackle as much. I wanted to focus more on what I like about Silent Hill 4. The interesting story and the horror elements being the key players. However, the backtracking is unforgivable, Henry is a weak protagonist, and it's such a clearly unfinished game, with many story beats not really going anywhere. Regardless, I've said what needs to be said. As for what you think of Silent Hill 4, maybe give it another chance. If you didn't like it originally, or if you're a newcomer, pick up a copy yourself and try it out. Oh god, right, that's over with. I am genuinely shocked at how long this video turned out. It might even end up being longer than that conscript video I did last year, but I think it was well worth it. I finally got to talk about a Silent Hill game, and given that I'm capturing footage of the original Silent Hill now, I might just get around to covering the other entries soon enough. All that said, my usual thanks to all those of you watching. They do take quite a bit of effort to produce, especially alongside my college work, so cheers for sticking around. One thing I would like to say though, and I don't mean to be getting a bit too serious, but I can't help but feel I may be reaching the end of my tenure producing videos on this channel. For those of you that aren't aware, my college courses at this point are almost finished. I've done a Bachelor of Arts, I'm currently doing a Master's in History, and I'm probably going to go on to do my teacher training soon enough. As a result of that, I'm not really sure if I'm going to keep up these videos in years to come. Not that these videos are especially popular and I have a huge, massive fan base, but either way, you get the idea. There's not much else to add at this point, so I'll say my goodbyes. I hope you all had a very good new year, and with any luck, 2025 will all be good to us. So, take care, and we'll hopefully see you here again.